I'm pleased to say the Foreign Secretary joining us in the studio. Is it going to be a deal or no deal? I suspect you probably don't have the answer to that just yet, Mr. Raab. Good to see you this morning. Well, let's just start with a very straightforward question. Where are we as of 8:30 this morning in terms of those negotiations?
Well, look, I called in to check in with our team out in Brussels. They worked incredibly hard. You remember the PM has made clear we want to leave no stone unturned. So we've been at it very hard at the working technical level, if you like, with all the usual jousting of positions. But what really matters is what the EU is willing at a political level to commit to. There's a conversation that Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the Commission, will have with the Prime Minister later today. That's when we'll know. But I think we need to be really clear. There's two fundamental issues at stake: the issue of fisheries, the issue of the so-called level playing field. We want to be treated like any other independent, self-respecting democracy. If the EU can accept that at a political level, then there's every reason to be confident. But there is still, I think, a long way to go.
Why are they finding it so difficult to deal with that?
Well, I think it's been difficult. Look, there's all sorts of questions around the integrity of the single market that they talk to. But bottom line is, if you ask me, and I've been at this a while now...
Yes, you have indeed.
I think the EU is concerned that actually Britain might do rather well once we leave the EU, and is worried about the competitive advantage, even on the normal global rules that apply.
We'll talk in a second about those sticking points, but just in terms of the chronology of the day, what exactly is going to take place and when? When will that kind of final conversation take place between the two leaders?
Well, the exact timing is not quite clear yet, but it'll happen later on today. I think it's important. It doesn't, the technical talks matter. Getting creative solutions, understanding each other's positions really matters. But what ultimately is required at this 11th hour of the negotiation is moving the political logjam. That can only happen at the level of the Prime Minister and Commissioner von der Leyen.
So it is all about the leaders today. It is all about some injection of political will from both of them, you see it?
Well, look, we've been stuck on those two particular points. If the EU moves substantially and can alleviate the concerns that we've got about the way we're being treated, not like any other country in the world, on the EU's own terms, that can't be right. We can't accept that. But if the EU can find its way to treat us like a normal, independent third country, I think there's every reason to feel confident, but we are not there yet. And I think that's why that conversation is so important.
Is there the opportunity for discussions to go beyond this evening? If there is a deal to be done, we're hearing, the Prime Minister, exerting every muscle that he possesses, stretching every sinew. It does rather strike me that if that is the case, then, you would be open to continuing talks beyond this evening.
Well, I can't close the door on it, but I think there is a way that the EU's got to go to give us the reassurance on those 2 points. Of course, if we're 99% there on the outstanding issues, you wouldn't want to leave, as I say, any stone unturned. But I think it's quite a high bar.
Let's talk then about the level playing field. Just explain, do you have an objection to, in circumstances in which the European Union and the United Kingdom, that there was divergence, in terms of standards? Do you have an objection to, an increase in tariffs in those circumstances, just a blanket objection? Or is it the unilateral means by which the European Union would be able to apply those tariffs as things stand?
Two issues. First of all, are we bound to follow not just EU rules now, which is difficult to accept, but also in the future, when we don't know what they were, when we wouldn't have any say in them, where we wouldn't have any democratic accountability? We can't accept that. Of course, most free trade deals have global style level playing field commitments, basically political level, high level commitments. That's fine. We'd accept the ones that are there for Canada. We understand the concerns around that. Secondly is the way they're enforced. We presumably, I would have thought on all sides, want to narrow the issues if any disputes arise in the future to preserve the relationship. I don't think you want a nuclear sort of style reaction where tariffs go up, where we're back in the same old drama and soap opera every couple of years or even sooner than that, just because there's a particular issue around a particular sector. So I think it's about making sure we've got a relationship that we can preserve and nurture that isn't actually going to continue to be a thorn in both our sides.
So it does seem then, at least in terms of level playing field, that there is a way out of this for both sides. Now, whether that is some joint UK-EU body or some independent arbitrator, why have the EU proved so resistant to that?
Well, look, there's definitely a way out. It's whether there's the political will on the EU side to accept that we will not be treated differently from any other self-respecting, independent economy in the world, nor indeed different from the way that they would expect to be treated in their negotiations. So I think it's a pretty high-level political commitment. But the trouble is for the EU, and we respect both the integrity of the single market, but also the practical challenges, is that they're nervous that the UK actually could do rather well, that we may actually thrive. They're worried about that as a matter of competitive advantage. That's not a grubby thing for them to be concerned about, but of course we can't pretend that we're not going to make the very best of Brexit. But they're also worried about the message it sends within the EU.
Sure.
We understand those equities, but actually at the end of the day there is a win-win here, and that's what we're striving for.
But if you look at the words of, amongst others, Mark Rutte from the Netherlands, I mean, he makes it clear that in his view, it's not just any divergence that would trigger the imposition of tariffs. It has to be across a range. It would have to be of a significant divergence for anything to kick in. I mean, they're not saying that we can't tinker around the edges, but that we have to stay within the broad thrust of what the EU's kind of conditions are.
Well, look, Mark Rutte's one voice. He's normally pretty pragmatic. We're normally quite close to the Dutch on these matters. We've been close allies over the years, but there are plenty of other voices. But the bottom line is this. Are we pegged? Are we required to follow EU rules past, present, future? And do we have a situation where, when we're exercising the normal controls over our own laws, as any democracy does, we suddenly find there's this torpedo of tariffs that threatens the relationship in the future? It doesn't seem to me a particularly healthy way to go about things.
Isn't there a really simple fix to the issue of fishing?
Perhaps not a simple fix.
Perhaps not a simple fix. But there is a fix there, which is allowing some form of access to the European Union, to our waters, for a limited amount of time. I mean, the noises from government seem pretty positive towards that.
Yeah, but what you're not going to do is allow a decade to go by with us only controlling a fraction of our fisheries. I mean, look, and let's remember on some of these things, some of the proposals, some of the suggestions that have been put to us are pretty outlandish, frankly. They don't get more reasonable by repetition. So what we need is movement. We need some flexibility. Actually, on the positive side, if you look at the Joint Committee, which was dealing with the outstanding issues around Northern Ireland, we've had some progress this week. That's created not just, I think, some important reassurance around the issue of Northern Ireland, gives us a sense, actually, we can get there. But we'll need that same flexibility and pragmatism on the FTA.
But let's talk about what happens if the talks break down. We've heard the Prime Minister on a number of occasions talking about this. I just want to show you one quote that he gave at the end of last year, in fact. Clearly there has been an emphasis on getting the trade deal itself. But if we can bring up those words from Boris Johnson, this is what he actually has to say. And it's all to do with getting a deal. Can I absolutely guarantee that we will get a deal? I think I can. The possibility you're alluding to, no trade deal, simply will not happen. I mean, what went wrong?
Well, we agreed the withdrawal agreement, so we got a deal with the Northern Ireland Protocol, and the EU offer to us, written down in the political declaration, communicated to me way back when I was negotiating, was that we would have a free trade deal on a Canada-style terms if we resolved the Northern Ireland issues. So that was based on, oh, we've done that. Now we expect to be treated like an independent third country. We'll take the Canada or the South Korea type model of an FTA. And frankly, the goalpost shifted from the EU side.
Well, you should have been presumably aware of the fact that that could happen.
I think the Prime Minister was presuming good faith. But look, we can't give cast iron guarantees about
In what way is the European Union acting in bad faith?
We can't give cast iron guarantees on what the EU will do. But I think if they've said, as they said to me, as they said to the Prime Minister, if we resolve the Northern Ireland issues, we agree the withdrawal agreement, the money and things like that, the separation issues, there's a free trade deal, Canada-style, to be done, I think we're entitled to say, well, we're going to hold you to that, which is all we're doing.
Surely, though, the Prime Minister might better have said that rather than, can I absolutely guarantee that we will get a deal? I think I can.
Well, I think he was exuding the optimism and the confidence.
Which he often does, and it lands him in hot water like this.
Well, and he's showing his steel and his metal that actually we're not going to just lie down on two such important principles. But actually we've gone into this with a spirit of pragmatism, with optimism, goodwill. What we've just found at the last analysis and at the last stage, the EU has found letting go of its control over the UK very difficult. I think emotionally, politically, if you like, they've got to come to terms with that.
It does rather feel that this is the point at which we are moving from saying we enter into these negotiations with good faith to saying, look, it's not our fault. It's the European Union's fault that you're going to be seeing us come out of the come out without a trade deal the end of this year. I mean, look, we're on the 13th of December at the moment, and businesses still don't know what the trading conditions are going to be like in 18 days' time. 18 days, which of course include Christmas and New Year.
Well, actually, that's not quite true, because a lot of the approach that they'll need to do, some of the checks will apply in either scenario. We've put in place a border operating model, £700 million going into supporting infrastructure, 1,100 extra staff at the border by March. That's a rolling process. The business task force that we've put in place, I think it's 50 million on things like customs intermediaries, so that those businesses that aren't sure how they deal with the customs aspects can get some support. We've communicated with 80% of SMEs, and yes, you're right, there's a difference if we get a deal. That's mainly on the tariff side. So that, yes, there will be changes come what may at the end of January. We've done a pretty good job not just of preparing for it, but also communicating that to those that need to have that certainty.
We're also sticking Royal Navy ships in the Channel to protect our fish.
Well, look, this is one of the ironies. If we leave without a further deal on WTO Australia-style terms, the French and others will have zero access assured to UK waters.
But as we're trying to get a trade deal with the European Union, why are the front pages of some of the right-wing tabloids carrying headlines about gunboats and kind of raising 2 digits towards the continent?
Well, look, you can better speak to what the tabloid media may judge as editorially fit and proper. But the bottom line is, actually, if we do leave on WTO terms, we'll be an independent coastal state. Of course, we're going to enforce our waters around fisheries and whatever else. And of course, for the French and others, that will mean, forget those outlandish terms that they were asking of us. They'd have their fishing industries would have zero access guaranteed.
Can we, though, not for the 17 million plus who voted for Brexit, just inject a degree of honesty in all of this? There will be people who voted for Brexit who will lose their jobs as a result of a no-deal exit from the European Union. It's just a simple statement of fact. And many of them will still continue to support Brexit. So perhaps we'd like to hear from government ministers this morning. It's just a little bit of contrition. Do you know what? We've got to where we are for a variety of reasons. But, ultimately, we have failed. We promised that we would get a trade deal. If it doesn't happen today, it doesn't happen in the next few days, there has been a failure by this government in not achieving it.
Well, first of all, as you would expect, I'm making the case that if the EU had followed through on its commitments, we'd have a free trade deal. It ought to be doable. In relation to our mandate, at the last election, we're very clear. We got an 80-strong majority at the last election. Yeah. But we do want to get a deal if it's at all possible. Equally, there are some positives that I think are all too often downplayed. We've seen recently from Netflix to Merck, the big pharmaceutical company, investing anew in British headquarters and British hubs because they've got that confidence in this country going forward. And I think if you look at the free trade deals that we're doing around the world, I'm off to India next week, the growth opportunities over the medium to long term will all come, I think, from the Indo-Pacific area. So yes, we want to fix the European issue, but actually, if you look long term, I think there are huge opportunities. I don't think we should eclipse all of those.
If there is no deal, would there be the possibility of continuing discussions come the new year?
Look, I'm not going to speculate on hypotheticals, but what I would say is this: obviously, we're going to be willing to engage in a common sense way. I think there would want to be some understanding about the mitigations so we deal with the worst impacts. So, of course, conversations could continue on that. But the reality is, for the EU, their point of pressure is now. After January the 1st, the idea that they would somehow be able to win concessions later that they can't win now, I think is for the birds.
I wonder if we might just talk COVID for the remainder of our time together. And of course, there's been a lot of news around this week, so perhaps the acknowledgement that we have got a vaccine out there in the community, perhaps not reported as much as it otherwise might. Can we be accurate about how many people have been vaccinated thus far?
Well, we're being very careful about the numbers because we want to be accurate and reliable. We will make them clear once we've got them. But the first tranche is 800,000. We've focused on the most elderly, NHS key workers, those in care homes. The programme is through to the spring, where we hope to be able to move to a whole better place for the country in terms of restrictions, that we will have enough people vaccinated, those with high vulnerability, those over the age of 55, key workers, in order to do that. So that's the rolling, phased approach we're taking.
But can we be a bit more specific? Have there been thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands?
I don't have the exact figures now, and we've been quite careful about this because we want to get it absolutely right when we publish them, but we will do regularly.
Do you have have them? I mean, I know I'm an example of Scottish exceptionalism, but the Scottish government, were able to produce a figure earlier this week. Why can't this government?
Well, we've only just started the rollout. We're a week in, so what we want to just absolute focus is getting those needles in arms. But we have got a process, a rolling process, where we can publish, and of course we'll need to track it very carefully, because part of the game plan to get to spring is to have enough of the elderly and the high vulnerability and the key workers done, so the country can really move into a place more akin to normal. It's a long marathon between here and there, but actually it's fantastic news we've rolled out the vaccine.
Indeed.
A lot of other countries are not in that position. We want to work with them as well.
Sure, but if you invite us all along to point our cameras at the person who's getting vaccinated first in the United Kingdom, you should probably expect a question about how many people have been vaccinated.
And I've made it clear that our first tranche and our first rollout, the first phase of the rollout, is 800,000.
Warning in some of the newspapers this morning that relaxing the COVID restrictions around Christmas, for that Christmas bubble, could lead to a third wave of coronavirus in the United Kingdom. Does the government keep that Christmas window under review? Is it possible that Christmas might not be on, given the way that infection is going in various parts of the country?
No, but it's right to be concerned about the state of the virus. We're not yet there. As I said, we've got to bridge to the spring, and that's why the tiered approach, which is stricter in localised areas than we had before, is in place. And on Wednesday, there'll be a review of it against 5 criteria. Hopefully some can come down, but if necessary, others can go up the tiered approach. But the bottom line is we must keep control of the virus, keep it coming down. I think just in relation to Christmas, it's been a really tough year all round.
Telling me.
Everyone's felt it. I think people do need that 5-day window over Christmas to spend a bit of time with their loved ones. And I think at a mental health level and emotional level, people do need it. That slack over that, it's only a 5-day period, is built into all of the other approaches that we're taking, which is why we've been tougher, more restrictive in the tiered approach.
I get that, but for a government which self-describes as guided by the science, I mean, if the science is telling you that 5 days of freedom over Christmas will lead to a third wave, I just wonder why the option of removing that Christmas bubble has been taken off the table.
Well, that's not what the scientists have advised us. What they've said is if you want to have that 5-day window, you've got to be really careful between now and then and thereafter. That's why we've got the tiered approach, buttressed by mass community testing, which if you look in, say, Liverpool, got the rate of coronavirus down by, I think it was around 2/3, 3/4 in fairly short order. So we've got the tools, and that does allow us just to take a little time with our loved ones over Christmas.
Yeah, well, I wish you a very Merry Christmas when it
And
comes.
you.
Dominic Raab, lovely to see you this morning.
Good to see you.